Now it's very important for us to know that the first reaction by the President of the European Commission, Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker. Jean-Claude, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Taoiseach, ladies and gentlemen, to be very short, I couldn't more agree. But as Mr. Farage is, but I have to deliver a speech because the disappointment would be too big if I wouldn't do so. I'm delighted, that's what I wanted to say, that I'm delighted that my good friend Leo comes before this House today, and I would like to thank President Tajani and the Parliament for holding this timely debate on the future of our Union. This is the first of the kind, and the first of many, I hope. Since he became Prime Minister, Leo has proven to be a committed European. I knew it before, but he has proven it now, being where he is for the time being. It is fitting that today we remember with sadness another true Irish and European statesman. I would like to pay my personal tribute to Peter Sutherland. He was the first ever Commissioner to receive the gold medal from this House. I was deeply saddened to hear of his passing. Peter Sutherland was a proud Irishman, another giant of European politics, and a friend of so many. He will be missed, but his legacy lives on. As Peter in the past shaped our policies of today, so can we shape the policies of the future with the choices we make today. It was less than a year ago that I presented to you the white paper on the future of Europe, 5 possible scenarios for our project. Since then, the debate has picked up in all corners of Europe. The white paper set a new approach: debate, not dictate. And the white paper and the different scenarios are still inspiring the debate across Europe. However, the future of Europe cannot remain a scenario. The time to take decisions is now, because citizens will head to the polls in May 2019, and in doing so, they should have a clear understanding of how the European Union will develop over the years to come. Last September, I therefore presented to you my very own vision for a more united, stronger and more democratic union. A union where solidarity and responsibility go hand in hand in all policy areas, from migration to the banking and monetary union, from energy to our common budget. A union where the rule of law is not optional, but the very basis of everything we do, from implementing decisions jointly taken to preparing enlargements. A union of equals, where the euro and Schengen, the most visible expressions of European integration, continue to unite our continent. Since the publication of the white paper, a lot has happened. The Commission has organised hundreds of citizens' dialogues, important, 6 of them in Ireland, and I'm happy to see that the Taoiseach himself has launched citizens' dialogues on the future of Europe across Ireland, from Galway to Dublin. This is how it should be. To succeed in Europe, we have to put an end to this eternal artificial opposition between the Union and its member states. Our Union can only be built with our member states, never against them. And this is why your invitation of national leaders to this House, President Tajani, is so important. I'm delighted to see the commitment from the European Council. It has agreed the leaders' agenda, 17 summits in the next 18 months on the road to Sibiu, Hermannstadt, to chart our common future. This is even more than we had at the height of the Eurozone crisis. But with one important difference. This time, we are not repairing the burning plane while flying, as we had to do it during the crisis. Instead, we are now fixing the roof of our European house while the sun is shining. We know what we need to do together: completing our economic and monetary union, securing our borders, delivering on our social agenda, making our tax system fairer, reforming our asylum system, getting back to Schengen and completing the digital market and the energy union. In all these talks on Europe's future, I have been privileged to have a close working relationship with the Taoiseach. And there is no better example than we say we worked during the first phase of negotiations with the United Kingdom. When it comes to the issue of Ireland in these negotiations, Europe is united. It is all for one and one for all. The Commission and the Irish government worked tirelessly, side by side, to help us reach the sufficient progress needed to move on to the next phase of the talks. This partnership will continue, and this partnership will grow stronger as we work on the future of our Union at 27. I read with pleasure Leo's speech at Citizens' Dialogue last November, when he set out his vision for, I'm quoting, a Europe that continues to do well what it does well, that focuses on big things and that, where appropriate, devolves some powers back to member states, municipalities and regions. For me, this is more than just a beautiful poem. These are the essential questions we all need to answer when going into the negotiations for the next European budget. This debate on the budget will be an open and honest discussion, and one that goes right to the heart of the debate of the future of the European Union. If we want the European Union to be more than a single market, nothing not more than a single market, then a single small budget will be sufficient. But if we want a European border and coast guard to protect our external borders, or European civil protection teams to help in case of floods or fires, then the answer is simple. Member states must put their money where their mouths are. Only one. Sehr verehrter Herr Präsident, genau weil diese Zukunftsfragen jetzt in Angriff genommen werden müssen, haben wir vorgeschlagen, unter der Leitung von Vizepräsident Timmermans eine Taskforce über Subsidiarität und Proportionalität einzurichten. Im nächsten Wahlkampf wird das genauso sein wie im letzten Wahlkampf. Wenige haben nur den Mut, in Bürgerversammlungen, auf öffentlichen Plätzen, in Bierzelten oder sonst wo aufzustehen, wenn es heißt, die Europäische Union und die europäische Politik in Gänze zu verteidigen. Man wird immer wieder den Bürgern sagen, Europa macht zu viel und Europa muss weniger tun. Es gibt Bereiche, wo Europa mehr tun muss. Ich habe sie oft hier erwähnt. Es gibt aber auch Bereiche, wo wir uns zurücknehmen sollen, wo weniger mehr wäre und wo weniger Tatendrang mehr Fortschritt brächte als blindes Losstürmen Zielen entgegen, die uns eigentlich von unserem Instrumentarium her unerreichbar scheinen. Und deshalb wäre es mein Wunsch, dass das Europäische Parlament sich an dieser Taskforce beteiligen würde. Mir wird berichtet, but this is a house full of rumors, dass das Europäische Parlament an dieser Taskforce nicht teilnehmen würde und wolle. Das ist ein grober Fehler. Ein grober Fehler. Weil wir brauchen das Europäische Parlament, wenn wir darüber reden, welche Kompetenzen der Europäischen Union in die Mitgliedstaaten zurückverlagert werden können. Und dies wird eine Debatte sein, wo man natürlich dann auch darüber reden muss, was wir besser machen können, indem wir mehr tun. Auch über neue Kompetenzen muss geredet werden. Aber die Hauptaufgabe ist, Ordnung zu bringen in das Zuständigkeitsgerangel zwischen der Europäischen Union und den Mitgliedstaaten. Ich bitte deshalb herzlich, vor allem die großen Fraktionsführer dieser Welt, diesen Beschluss, falls es ihn dann gibt, zu überprüfen, weil es ist nicht im Interesse des Europäischen Parlaments, Kommission und Vertreter der Mitgliedstaaten, sich alleine ohne das nicht tut, das Europäische Parlament ist, sich alleine mit diesen Fragen zu beschäftigen. Mr. President, since 1999, the Good Friday Agreement has preserved peace and enabled progress where there once was bloodshed and discord. We all know that peace can be fragile, and I see no more important use of our new budget than guaranteeing and financing the peace process in Ireland. This is an unconditional European commitment. This is what the Commission will deliver with our proposal for the next multi-annual financial framework in May. Our new budget must be as ambitious as the goals we set ourselves and as flexible as possible to adapt to new and unforeseen challenges. Our future cannot wait. Together with Leo, with the Irish and with others, we'll swim in that direction. Thank you.
Grazie Jean-Claude. Io non credo che sia stato un errore la decisione del Parlamento di non partecipare ad un gruppo di lavoro organizzato dalla Commissione europea dove 3 deputati sarebbero stati parte insieme ad altri funzionari di uno studio. Noi condividiamo che l'ipotesi e la necessità di legiferare meglio, di ridurre il numero di norme, ma devo ricordare che per il trattato il Parlamento è la prima istituzione della Unione europea e non può essere trattato come un qualsiasi consulente che partecipa con 3 parlamentari ad un gruppo di lavoro. Non è una questione di dignità, è una questione di rispetto dei trattati. Nessuna acrimonia nei confronti della Commissione, tutt'altro noi vogliamo collaborare con la Commissione, ma all'unanimità la conferenza dei presidenti, nessun gruppo escluso, tutti d'accordo, hanno deciso di non partecipare. Questo non significa che non intendiamo collaborare con la Commissione per legiferare meglio e per lavorare nell'interesse dei nostri concittadini. Anche questo fa parte del dibattito. Ora cominciamo con gli interventi dei leader dei gruppi politici. Vi prego di rispettare il tempo a voi assegnato. Dopo gli interventi dei leader ci sarà una risposta del Taoiseach, poi cominciamo con il catch the eye e ci sarà un'altra risposta del Taoiseach. Siccome alle 12:30 dobbiamo iniziare le votazioni, vi prego di rispettare i tempi a voi assegnati. Il primo intervento è quello di Manfred Weber a nome del gruppo del Partito Popolare Europeo.
Dear President, dear Taoiseach, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it was a good decision to ask Leo Varadkar, the Irish Prime Minister, to do the start of our Future of Europe debate in the European Parliament. It was a great speech, a great contribution to our debate. And I think we can, first of all, take out of this speech that it is good to follow the Irish example. Because when I look to the last years, then the Irish politicians, Anna Kenny, Leo Varadkar, didn't point the finger to others when it's about to take over responsibility, clean up the budget and do the necessary reforms. They simply did their job. The Irish government showed also in the last days how big, how strong you can be if you are part of the European Union. In the Brexit negotiations, another example where the Irish point is a good point. And finally, I must say that the tradition of referendums in Ireland helps a lot to explain people what is Europe all about. So this not blaming and shaming of Brussels, explaining what is going on in Brussels, explaining what is going on in Strasbourg, that is great. There are a few aspects I would see when I look to Ireland in the future of Europe. But now Europe stands at a crossroad between hate and hope. Demagogues play with the people's fears, and for their selfish goals, they are spreading hate. That is our challenge. We have to bring hope to the people. We know that the Europeans don't want to live in anger. They are proud of their European culture, of their achievements, and they want to protect the European way of life. They want to combine prosperity with fairness. They want to combine freedom with security and cultural identity with tolerance. That is what Europe is all about. And when we have this in mind, I think we have to make it concrete, what Leo also did in his speech. To talk about security for jobs, about social fairness, about quality of life. And the promise, can we protect this in a globalized world? This promise has to be founded now. We have to give good arguments to this. It's either a Europe which is fair or not a Europe at all. Furthermore, we see in times of Putin and IS that the people are looking for protection, for security. That's why your statement on the future of the European defence is a great statement. I myself, I was a few months ago in Estonia, and I visited the NATO air base there. A Belgian pilot told me what he is doing with the air policing towards the Russian border. And I asked him, would it be a problem for you if on your uniform there is not anymore the Belgian flag? What would he say when there will be the European flag in the future? And this young pilot told me, for me, it makes no difference. For me, it was always clear that I defend our European values when I'm in my aircraft. Dear colleagues, it's either a Europe that is strong in defence or it's not a Europe at all. And finally, about culture, I think, dear colleagues, we have to be aware that the whole world is listening to European music, is reading our literature. Europe is the leading cultural continent on this world. And Europe provides cultural diversity instead of the commercial mismatch from Hollywood. The question, dear friends, is now, how can we protect this? How can we bring this in a globalized and a digital world? And probably the idea of Emmanuel Macron to create a European Netflix, to bring all our cultural heritage in one digital form together with free access to everybody, could be a good idea for this. It's either a Europe sticking to the cultural richness or not a Europe at all. Dear colleagues, there are a lot of things to do, but having our fundamental ideas for the European Union in mind, our founding fathers were always aware, de Gasperi, Kohl and others, that the European integration was always ambitious, it was always concrete in the projects, and that's why we have to look for these concrete projects for the next days and weeks and years. Let's get things done. It's either an ambitious Europe or it's not a Europe at all. Thanks so much.
A nome del gruppo socialista, la parola all'onorevole Kofod.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you so much, Taoiseach Varadkar, for an excellent speech, for your commitment to Europe, for commitment to cooperation. I think the European Union is the foundation of our prosperity, our security in Europe. Ireland and my own country, Denmark, share similar history, as you know. We joined the European community at the same time, January 1st, 1973, 45 years ago today. Both of our countries have seen tremendous changes. We have benefited from the single market, from the wealth of trade agreements with third countries, from EU funding and cooperation throughout the history. But for us, also as socialists and democrats, Europe is much more than trade and profits. It's about solidarity, it's about prosperity of our people, it's about protecting strong welfare states where nobody of our citizens is left behind. Solidarity is the future of Europe, working together, helping each other to overcome the shared challenges in the 21st century. Globalization, climate change, the refugee crisis, all of these we have to face together. Next year, the United Kingdom will leave the European Union. This, of course, will have a special impact on Ireland and the people of Ireland. And let me be absolutely clear, the European Parliament will stand firmly on upholding the Good Friday Agreement and securing peace, cooperation and prosperity throughout the Emerald Isle. It's very important. Solidarity, we also expect, of course, and I need to take the opportunity to take this debate from the Irish government, the same commitment to solidarity, fairness and cooperation on other issues. So when we build a single market in Europe, free flow of capital, goods, services and people, it's also important that we fight tax avoidance and avoidance, protect our tax bases, our welfare states, our people against the tax evasion we see. What we have seen in Europe, and I have to also give the example on Ireland, when Apple only pays €50 per €1 million they earn on their profits is a disgrace. It's not acceptable. We need to change that behavior. We need to stop the never-ending race to the bottom on corporate taxation. We need to protect our welfare state. We need a common rule book in Europe on corporate taxation. And that's also why I ask you also, Prime Minister, to fight for the common consolidated corporate tax base, creating a tax system in the 21st century that is fair, that serves our state, that serves our citizens. And I also want to say, we share a lot of challenges. We also need to build a Europe, as you said, that will protect the citizens of Europe, the workers. Good, decent work and good salaries are the basis of our societies. And therefore also the social Europe you mentioned is part of that agenda. And we need to see action in that field as well. We also need to see that when we do trade liberalization, to trade agreements, we ensure that these trade agreements also are followed by our values, our rules on sustainable development, protecting the environment, protecting labor rights, protecting human rights, ensuring that big corporations pay their fair taxes. This is equally important. But building a Europe of the 21st century, we are, as you said, much stronger together than apart. That's true. And you said single market is not just for our citizens if we do not protect our citizens also against, for example, big corporations or people that take advantage of a single market to undermine our societies. It's very important. So, Mr. Prime Minister, I have to commend you for standing up for Europe, but I think we also need to talk about what type of fair Europe we can create for the future. So thank you so much for this, and I look forward to work with you and all others who want to change Europe for the better of the people. Thank you so much.
Per il gruppo dei conservatori e dei riformisti europei ha la parola l'onorevole Van Dalen.
Voorzitter, dank u wel. Dit debat heeft als titel de toekomst van Europa. Dat is mij eerlijk gezegd wat abstract. Het gaat over de toekomst van onze burgers. En logisch dat in de aanwezigheid van de Ierse premier de Brexit centraal staat. Het antwoord van veel Europese leiders daarop is: never waste a good crisis, vol gas vooruit naar meer Europa. Ik denk dat doorduwen naar een ever closer union pennywise but pound foolish is. En bij onze burgers het tegenovergestelde effect zal hebben. Ja, het klopt. De laatste Eurobarometerpeilingen laten zien dat men wat positiever denkt over Europa. Maar vergeet niet dat de laatste jaren elk referendum over Europa verkeerd uitpakte voor de pro-Europeanen. Denk aan het justitiesamenwerking-referendum in Denemarken, het Oekraïne-referendum in Nederland en het Brexit-referendum in het UK. Als de burgers dan positiever denken over Europa, waarom dan toch steeds die tegenstem? Ik denk, voorzitter, dat het nodig is dat onze burgers een Europa willen zien dat echt werkt. Maar zo gaat het nog niet. We voeren de euro in op basis van de no-bail-out-clausule en het stabiliteits- en groeipact. Vervolgens negeren we die twee en gaan we tot in detail elkaars nationale begrotingen uitpluizen. Een vrij nutteloze oefening natuurlijk, als handhaving tegen de structurele begrotingszondaars zoals Frankrijk al jaren ontbreekt. En dan moeten we ook nog beginnen aan een eurozonebegroting en Europese schuldpapieren. Dat lijkt me de uitgelezen route om opnieuw een nee van onze burgers te zien en een lage opkomst bij de Europese verkiezingen. Wat dan wel? Ik denk een pas op de plaats. En eerst beginnen met handhaven en vooral nakomen wat we met elkaar hebben afgesproken. Op die manier winnen we weer het vertrouwen van de burgers. Dat is echte solidariteit en dat is het bieden van echte hoop. Dank u wel.
Ora, per il gruppo dell'Alleanza dei Democratici e dei Liberali, la parola all'onorevole Guy Verhofstadt.
Thank you, President. Taoiseach, I think that our European Union can learn a lot from Ireland. And when I'm saying that, I'm not talking about the weather forecasts, naturally. I'm talking about what I call the capacity, the Irish capacity to transform, to reinvent itself, as happened the last decades. And I think that's exactly what we need in Europe today. This capacity to transform ourselves and to reinvent ourselves and not to destroy ourselves as some of our colleagues want. 30 years ago, Ireland was a very different country. I think only 7% was born abroad. Today, that's more than 70%. I think that Ireland has become today one of the most diverse nations of the European Union. And the Irish economy has been successfully integrated migrants from over the world, from Poland, from Nigeria. And Ireland has become also the home country for a number of big companies, international IT giants. And Ireland is today, let me say that way, not longer a country of emigration. It has become a country, I should say, of destination, and also a country with a lot of pro-European, sometimes very critical, but always constructive, and that is absolutely key. So what I hope to see, Taoiseach, is in this debate in Ireland that can show the same European leadership as happened in the past. Let me remind that in 1985, 1986, it was Gareth Fitzgerald, your predecessor, who gave the final support to the Single European Act. And it was a crucial support because it was the first time that Ireland broke away from the British position and gave the possibility to push forward the European agenda. And it is this Single European Act, dear colleagues, that later resulted in the single market, and that is now seen and has been seen as the biggest European achievement. Even Margaret Thatcher found it the biggest European achievement of European politics. And the same happened in 2004 and 2007. After the enlargement of the European Union, it was Ireland who championed, in fact, the freedom of movement of all people in the European Union, also of the Polish plumber, also of the Romanian doctor. And so what I hope, Taoiseach, is that Ireland continues to have such a commitment to reform the European Union now. Your voice is critical in this debate. And I see 4 things to do. The first is the new governance for the Eurozone. The second is the European Defence Union. The third is the new European asylum and migration policy. We get to get rid of Dublin. Not of the city of Joyce, naturally. Yeah? I mean the Dublin migration regulation, and we need to have something completely different where not Italy and Greece took all the burden. And we need, finally, I think also a deep democratic reform with a transnational democracy, and I thank you for your support for that important reform that I hope in the coming weeks we can achieve. And lastly, and the President of the Commission is right, we need a budget that goes in parallel with this. It's impossible to say to the citizens, look, citizens, you're right, we need more this, we need more that, we need more European action, but at the same time not to give the necessary instruments and the necessary budget. And finally, President, I think there is a new generation of politicians in Europe that is standing up. And you have to know one thing, that is the last thing what I'm going to say, and it's on Brexit. Whatever stance you will take, Taoiseach, Europe will always be behind you. We know what is at stake in this Brexit negotiation. We know how existential it is for you. Well, know that we will always be behind you. In these negotiations, we are all Irish. You have to know that.
Grazie onorevole Verhofstadt. Ora per il gruppo confederale della sinistra unitaria europea, sinistra verde nordica, la parola all'onorevole Zimmer.
Herzlich willkommen, Taoiseach, zu unserer Debatte hier im Europäischen Parlament. Spätestens seit dem Brexit erahnen wir, welche Folgen ein solcher Austritt hinsichtlich der sozialen und Bürgerrechte für die betroffenen Menschen hat. Nicht nur in Großbritannien selbst, sondern auf der irischen Insel und in der gesamten EU. Ein Zurück zu erneuten harten Grenzen in Europa kann es für uns nicht geben. Wir werden uns dem immer verweigern. Meine Fraktion wird auch alles dafür tun, das Karfreitagsabkommen in all seinen Bestandteilen zu verteidigen. Ein Zusammenwachsen und der Aufbau Europas sind aus meiner Sicht unausweichlich. Und doch steht die Frage, weil wir über den Brexit und die Verhandlungen zum Brexit hinausdenken müssen, ob das heutige Europa, die heutige Europäische Union mit ihren Verträgen, mit ihren Strukturen, mit ihren Institutionen geeignet ist, um wirklich die Hoffnungen der Menschen auf ein soziales, solidarisches Miteinander, auf einen Kampf gegen den Klimawandel tatsächlich auch umzusetzen. Und wir sagen in meiner Fraktion, wir haben erhebliche Zweifel daran, dass das so funktionieren wird. Ich möchte gar nicht aufzählen, mit welchen Problemen die EU gegenwärtig konfrontiert ist. Das haben wir hier oft genug getan. Ich möchte nur dazu sagen, dass es wichtig ist, dass wir uns den Ungleichheiten zwischen den Mitgliedsländern stellen, den Ungleichheiten zwischen Bevölkerungsgruppen, dass wir den Kampf gegen Armut endlich ernsthaft anstreben. Und da brauchen wir Formen der Regierbarkeit der Europäischen Union. Ich habe den Eindruck, dass die Europäische Union in einigen entscheidenden Fragen nicht regierungsfähig ist und nicht regierbar ist. Das ist die Migrationsfrage, das ist der Kampf gegen die Steueroasen, das ist der Kampf gegen die soziale Ungleichheit. Und die EU befindet sich in einer Legitimationskrise. Sie haben vorhin gesagt, wir müssen den EU-Bürger wieder in den Vordergrund stellen. Ja, dazu müssen Sie die entsprechenden Instrumente bekommen, die entsprechenden Rechte bekommen. Sie müssen der Mittelpunkt unserer Debatte um die Zukunft der Europäischen Union werden. Sie müssen die Europäische Union mitgestalten, weil diese nicht einfach von oben verändert werden kann. Wir müssen radikal ran an die Wurzeln. Wir müssen auch über Vertragsänderungen nachdenken. Und da bitte ich Sie um die entsprechende Unterstützung.
Grazie onorevole Zimmer. Ora per il gruppo Verde la parola all'onorevole Lambert.
Mr. Prime Minister, it's a real pleasure to welcome you here. You've demonstrated again in your speech the depth of your country's and your own commitment to the European project. We all got familiar with your name at the occasion of the Brexit debate, and Ireland is obviously the member state that will be most affected by it, not just for economic reasons, but because this is about peace on the island. Let me just say this, we are at your side on this. Letting violence erupt again in Ireland would not just spell disaster for the concerned communities, but it would be an arrow through Europe's heart, because the European Union is and remains a peace project. Brexit is a challenge we could have avoided, but it should not detract us from those challenges that are existential to the future of Europe. And allow me, Taoiseach, to mention two of them that I find particularly relevant to Ireland. First, our societies will need to find ways to live within the biophysical constraints that nature sets us. There's simply no way around it. And Europe has a choice here, either to become leaders in the ecological transition of our societies, thereby becoming solution providers to the rest of the world, or to stick with the past, thereby becoming solution takers from the rest of the world. From a young entrepreneurial prime minister such as you, I would expect the first option. Yet, Taoiseach, your government has been sorely lacking ambition on tackling climate change. You said when you became prime minister that climate action would be your first priority. Yet, it doesn't really show. This year, Ireland was ranked as Europe's worst performer in tackling climate change. It's one of only 2 countries in the EU that will miss its 2020 emission reduction targets. And now your government seeks special deals and exemptions from quite modest 2030 targets. On a similar line, Prime Minister, your government opposes the waste reduction bill proposed by the Irish Greens, which aims just at bringing your country on a par with the best practices across Europe on the way to a more circular economy. Come on, Taoiseach, with its abundant resources of renewable energy, Ireland has the potential to be a pioneer in the green transformation. Your countries and Europe's prosperity depend on it. You will hardly be surprised by the second topic that I want to raise, which is, of course, taxation. If we want our single market and single currency to thrive and to deliver benefits to all and not just the richest, we need to stop this race to the bottom on taxation and on social protection. And you know that Ireland often comes to the fore as a tax haven for corporates. Of course, you would argue, and I would agree with you, that several member states offer real taxation rates to multinationals that are way lower than the Irish nominal 12.5%. And you would say that Ireland should be allowed to find ways to make up for a geographical disadvantage. I agree with all of this. But surely the alternative cannot be between a one-size-fits-all taxation system that would work for the central, big and core European countries to the detriment of everyone else, and a no-holds-barred tax competition that we have right now. And instead of playing the holdout, instead of fighting European Commission decisions in court, I would expect Ireland to be at the core of efforts to better cooperate on tax matters in order to give tax justice a chance in Europe. It is not just our excessive ecological footprint, but also ballooning inequalities that threaten the very existence of our civilized societies. Taoiseach, the European project is about establishing a lasting peace on our continent through shared prosperity on the one hand, and on the other through anchoring our societies in the values of freedom, democracy and human rights. And I'm very glad that your government wants to ensure the right of women to control their own bodies. I hope that the upcoming referendum will allow your country to make progress in that direction at a time where we see progress in the other direction in too many parts of Europe. Taoiseach, if you can deploy the same leadership on the ecological transition and on tax justice that the one that you deploy here, you will have done a lot for the European Union. I'm sure you can do it. Thank you.
A nome del gruppo Europa della Libertà e della Democrazia Diretta, ha la parola l'onorevole Farage.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Varadkar, you are very popular here. A standing ovation from left and centre and right. Mr. Juncker looking joyous. In fact, this European project could have no greater, stronger devotee for a militarised, expansionist United States of Europe. You, of course, worked here as a young man. You're a devotee. In fact, we should call you, I think, a European Unionist, whatever the cost to Ireland may be. Normally, of course, small countries count for nothing here. It's run by the big boys, but right at the minute, you're important and you're useful because you've helped with the obstructionism and the delay of Brexit. Firstly, on the Good Friday Agreement, where, as you know, the European Union had little or nothing to do with it. They were written in at a later stage, but of course, as everyone knows, nothing binds either side to continued membership of the Union, and you know the UK government intends to fully uphold it. The border issue has been put up as a problem, but I think your predecessor, Bertie Ahern, has said, look, in practical terms, we don't face a problem. There's been a common travel area between us, of course, for decades, but it is on trade where that border could, in some ways, be challenged. And of course, when you think that nearly 50% of exports from Irish-owned companies go to the United Kingdom, and agriculture, in some sectors, it's as high as 90%, you potentially have quite a lot to lose. And yet, despite the fact that no one should be fighting harder for a genuine, rounded trade deal than you, that doesn't appear to be the case. In fact, I'd even go further and say that if there was no trade deal between the European Union and the United Kingdom, an exception should be made for Ireland because of political sensitivity. And it's something that the World Trade Organization, I have no doubt, would back up. And yet it seems to me that you're prepared to put your devotion to the European project above the interest of Irish farmers and other companies too. And I wonder why. Well, let's cast our minds back a short distance. The rejection of the Lisbon Treaty by the Irish, a second referendum forced on their people, conducted on the most unfair, undemocratic lines that I have ever seen. You are part, of course, of a big attempt, here and elsewhere, to frustrate and to attempt to overturn Brexit. You don't want Britain to leave because you know if they do, others will leave too. And I would just say this to you. I don't want a second referendum on Brexit, absolutely not. But I fear that you are all working together with Tony Blair and Nick Clegg to make sure we get the worst possible deal. I say that because I've seen it all before. The difference is, if you force the Brits to do it again, there'll be a different outcome. Yeah.
Well said. Per il gruppo Europa delle Nazioni e della Libertà ha la parola l'onorevole De Graaf.
President, let me give you a scenario that's not in the white book of Mr. Juncker. When the EU continues on its present course, the future of Europe will be Islamic. That is the objective of the Islamic world, and that is the objective of the EU elite. It is the aim of the open border policy, and it's the aim of this criminal mass immigration. Of course, there are casualties of abuse, murder and rape. That's the price to pay for the extermination of national identities. That is deliberate EU policy. There's only one obstacle on the road to the European caliphate, and that are the patriotic citizens who vote for patriotic parties. The EU has declared these parties their enemies, their biggest threat. In the EU, the rule of law doesn't apply to patriots. They are homo sacer. The future of Europe is the caliphate unless the citizens rise and defend their culture and identity.
Ha parola l'onorevole Dodds, non iscritta.
Mr. President Taoiseach, thank you for your vision of the future of Europe. Obviously, it is a future with the United Kingdom outside of these institutions, but an important partner in trade, security, research and many other areas. As in the relationship between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, that future should be characterised by close links, shared values and cooperation. The outcome of Brexit on the ties between our two countries will serve as a wider test of the credentials of any deal reached between the United Kingdom and the European Union. You have rightly stressed that there should be no hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. We agree. But Mr. Varadkar, I hope you recognise that it is not in the Irish Republic's interest to see Northern Ireland suffer. That would be the case if barriers were erected within the United Kingdom internal market, disrupting almost 60% of local sales that go to Great Britain. The union that matters most to Northern Ireland, both constitutionally and economically, is within the United Kingdom. In focusing on the border, Mr. Varadkar, you must not forget the pre-existing relationships, east and west, that are of vital importance to both of our countries. 2018 will be a pivotal year for relationships between the European Union and the United Kingdom, between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. I hope that we can continue to build that positive future which is vital for peace, security and economic prosperity.
Taoiseach, you have the floor for the first answers.
Thank you very much. I've written down a few notes. I mightn't be able to answer everyone, but I'll do my best to touch on as many topics as I can. And first of all, just want to particularly thank almost all the speakers here today for their ongoing support and solidarity with Ireland. That's very much recognised, and we're very grateful for that. I think Mrs. Zimmer spoke about the need to reduce inequality among member states, and I think that's something that I can very much sign up to as well. It's a long time since enlargement, and there is still a huge gap in prosperity between Western Europe on the one hand and the countries of Central and Eastern Europe on the other. And I think that's why it's so important that the next MFF, the next European budget, contains in it adequate funding to continue to improve the infrastructure in Central and Eastern Europe and also to support the common agricultural policy. And I think it's why it's so important as well, as I mentioned in my speech earlier, that we put forward a realistic pathway to European membership for the Western Balkans. I think the best way we can stabilise that part of Europe is to give them a pathway towards joining the European Union. Those countries that used to be part of Yugoslavia and Albania as well. I think on tax, which I know is an issue of contention between many people in this chamber and Ireland, the view that we take as a government, and I think it's shared by a lot of governments in fact, is that national taxes should fund national budgets, and that is therefore a national competence and a matter of national sovereignty. We do have European taxes at the moment that fund European budget, or at least in part fund the European budget. We have that with customs, we have that with an element of VAT, and that's something that I'm not opposed to at all. And if you look at the model that exists in the United States, which is a federation, after all, there is a lot of tax competition between member states. There are federal income taxes and there are state income taxes. There are different sales taxes in different member states. So if the United States, the most successful economy in the world, can have tax competition among member states, why can't we have the same? And as I said, we have a number of federal taxes already, or European taxes already, that fund the EU budget, and that's something that that I think works quite well. In terms of the Apple case, I think it's important not to forget that it is a state aid case. Technically, it's not a tax case; it's a state aid case, and the contention is that Ireland had a special deal with one particular company, and quite frankly, we didn't, and that is why that case is being appealed both by Apple and by the Irish government. And ultimately, the European courts and the European Court of Justice will make a judgment on that. And whatever that judgment is, our government will accept. We're establishing an escrow account. We will collect the money in Q2 of this year, or at least start collecting it in Q2 of this year. And the money will be held in the escrow account until that decision is made by the European Court of Justice. But it is our contention and it is our belief that we did not have a special arrangement with that company. And we can't say that we did when we know that we didn't. But ultimately, that's going to be a matter for those courts to decide. But what I do want to say is that Ireland is not a tax haven. We don't want to be a tax haven. And we certainly don't want to be seen or perceived as a tax haven. And we have no interest, in fact, in a race to the bottom. Our low corporation tax rate, 12.5%, it's been around for 20 or 30 years now. We haven't increased it. We haven't reduced it. We've just kept it exactly as it is now. And Ireland won't win a race to the bottom. It's already the case that a number of countries have a lower tax rate for corporations than we do. Hungary and Bulgaria, just to give two examples. So if this is a race to the bottom, it's not one that Ireland is going to win. And then, as was mentioned by other speakers, countries like France, just to use one example, have a high corporation profit tax on paper, but have so many exemptions and so many different ways not to pay your tax that according to the OECD, their effective tax rate is actually lower than ours. So if it's a race to the bottom, it's not one that Ireland is going to win, and therefore not one that we want to participate on. The future of our economy and the future of our prosperity is going to be much more about human capital and attracting talent and people than attracting companies based on corporate tax rate. And we've already made a number of big changes to our tax policy. We've abolished the double Irish, got rid of stateless corporations. We've started taxing intellectual property again just this year. And we'll continue to make steps in those directions and close loopholes. But we want other countries to do that as well, quite frankly. And there's a bit of hypocrisy about that when you look at the amount of money that we actually collect in terms of corporate taxes versus other countries who collect so much less, but yet on paper have a higher tax rate. And I think that needs to be challenged. And it's also very much my strong contention that the progress that we make on this should be done on an international level through the OECD process. And I say that for a very obvious reason, that Europeans shouldn't do something unilaterally that only causes other countries that are not part of the European Union to gain an advantage over us, whether it's the United States, whether it's Japan, or whether it's the United Kingdom, which of course is going to leave. And we need to bear that in mind in anything that we do. On climate change, Ireland is somewhat unusual to other countries in that a huge amount of our greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture. And that's because we've never really had heavy industry. We never had those big heavy industries that other countries have decommissioned and shut down and achieved their targets in that way. That's not something we can do. But as far as I'm concerned, we are a laggard. I'm not proud of Ireland's performance on climate change. we need to do a lot more. And one of the things my government will do in the next few months is publish our 10-year investment plan, our capital investment plan for Ireland over the next 10 years. And central to that will be the kind of things that we want to do around climate change to make sure we meet those targets in 2030. And that includes things in transport like electrifying our railways. We only have one small part of our railway that's electrified. It's about transitioning our public transport and our bus fleet to low emissions. It's about electric cars in particular, where we put in some incentives, but they haven't got the results that we've liked. And there's lots of things that we intend to do so that we can meet those targets. And it's something that I'm very committed to, and certainly my generation of politicians is very committed to. It makes sense. It's not just the right thing to do, it makes sense economically, I think, in the longer term as well. In terms of the contribution of Mrs. Dodds, which I very much welcome, certainly I have no wish to see any borders between Northern Ireland and Ireland. And I also have no wish to see any new borders or barriers between Britain and Ireland, or between Northern Ireland and Britain. That's why I didn't want Brexit, because I don't want any borders. And certainly we'll do everything we can to avoid any of that taking place. And I know what you said, and I understand what you said, that the union that is most important for you is the United Kingdom, and the single market that is most important to you is the single market of the United Kingdom. And 70% of trade between Northern Ireland is with the rest of the United Kingdom. I acknowledge that. But it shouldn't be a choice between the 70% and the 30%. Why not take the 100%? And it is possible to have special arrangements for Northern Ireland, if needs be, that allows Northern Ireland to have that because of its unique situation. And I think that's something that I will work for, and something that I hope that politicians from all sides of Northern Ireland will be open to. If 100% is possible, take that, not 70 instead of 30. And I hope it's possible to for us to have that discussion a little bit more in the future. Just in relation to Mr. Farage's contribution, I just as a matter of information, I've never worked here, by the way. I've worked in Ireland and the United States. I've never worked in Europe or for a European institution. But in relation to small countries, I really have to disagree, because I experienced that in a very, very personal way, not just in relation to the support that we've received on Brexit from the European institutions, but also when, for the first time, I attended a European Council meeting, the meeting of the Prime Ministers and Presidents of Europe. And it's a really interesting and humbling experience to get to do that. And I know some of you who've been Prime Ministers will have had that experience, because Council of Ministers is very different. You go into this massive room, you sit there, the ambassador sits beside you, you have 6 officials behind you, and it's a very different experience when you go into the Council of Ministers. And I went into the Council of Ministers for the first time last year. I sat around the table, there were no officials there, the only people there were the President of the Council, the President of the Commission, and the heads of government of 26, 27 or 28 member states. And I come from a country that is only 4.5 million people. We're a small country. There are many provinces, even cities in other European countries that have more people than mine and have a bigger economy of mine. And I was sitting around the table as an equal with the President of France, the Chancellor of Germany, the Prime Minister of Spain, the Prime Minister of Italy, these really big countries. And that isn't the way Europe used to work. Before the European Union, the big countries would get together, they decide what is right for Europe, and they tell the rest of us. That doesn't happen anymore because of the European Council. And because of these, these European institutions, and I'm not so naive as to think that a country like Ireland, with 4.5 million people, can ever have the power or importance of a country like Germany with 80 million and its massive economy. But what the European Union allows us to do is it allows small countries to have a seat at the table when decisions are made, as opposed to having no say at all. And that's why I believe small countries are so much better off to be in this union. But finally, just in relation to Britain, and I want to say that Britain is a country that I care a lot about. Irish people are very close to British people in so many ways, even though sometimes we don't like to admit that. In so many ways, we have a shared culture and a shared history. And that's very much the experience of my family as well. My parents met and fell in love and got married in England. She's an Irish nurse, he's a doctor from India. They both went to Britain to build a new life, and that's where they met, that's where they married, that's where they fell in love. That's where my sister was born, and she still lives there in London with my niece and nephew, who are English kids. They point up at the Union Jack and they say, "Leo, that's our flag." And that's how close Irish people, in many ways, are to British people. We're connected by blood in so many different ways. And that's why I really regret the decision that has been made on Brexit, because so much will be lost. Young people will lose the right to live, work and study anywhere in the European Union, losing those rights as European citizens. My niece and nephew won't, because they're entitled to Irish passports, but the other kids in their class will, and I think that's a real shame. British businesses could lose their access. British businesses could lose their access to the biggest market in the world. Farmers, food producers, even the beer makers that you and I are so fond of could lose the subsidies that they currently benefit from, which are not guaranteed beyond this Parliament. And also, I'm conscious as well of British veterans, very brave people who fought on the beaches of France, not just for Britain, but also for European democracy and for European values. And people like that are always in my mind. So notwithstanding the decision to leave, and I respect that decision, I will absolutely fight hard to ensure that we can have as close as possible partnership and as close a possible relationship between the UK and the EU. It's in Ireland's interests, I think it's in the interests of British people, and it's in the interests of the European Union as well. I think we should conclude a new partnership and a new agreement with the UK. But fundamentally, what we have to move away from is any idea that any country can have a relationship that involves taking all the benefits and none of the responsibilities and obligations. And that's the fundamental thing that we need to insist on.